I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. And good afternoon, Columbus. And good morning, Bowling Green. And hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my enthusiastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to craft another wonderful hour of For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your coworkers, and the flowers that are blooming and the bees that are pollinating the flowers and the birds that are eating the bees, and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, we're all together here on this tiny little speck in the universe called Earth. And we have a great show for you today. Today is, of course, Happy Mother's Day to everyone. Start out with that. And then after, we're going to talk for just a few minutes here till about quarter after. Then we have an interview with one of our favorite guests, Diane D'Arrigo of Nuclear Information Resource Service, because they're up to some nasty shenanigans up there in Congress, trying to push nuclear crap down people's throats.
And if you let people, as the meme goes, if you let people shenan once, they'll shenan again.
Right. So you got to call them on it. Then after we hear from Diane, we'll hear from our wonderful, wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then Rebecca, it'll be your turn to take over the show. And what will you be talking about today?
Octomommies.
Octomommies. Okay, very appropriate for
Yes.
Mother's Day. Okay. Then it's Ecological News. And of course, at some point in the show, we'd hope to hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. This is the best show in Northwest Ohio, but it gets better every time you call. So, as I said, it's Mother's Day. So once again, Happy Mother's Day. Can't say that often enough. And I just want to say that one thing in the environmental movement is that there's lots of mothers in the environmental movement. I mean, many, many times what happens is there's a mother and she discovers some sort of environmental contamination in her area that's affecting her children. And that's what starts people down the path of becoming environmental activists, is they're literally trying to protect their kids from some threat. That was true of Lois Gibbs at Love Canal. It's true of the women of 3 Mile Island that we've been talking about for the past couple of years, because Heidi Hutner made that wonderful movie that documented who they were and what they were doing and what they've done over the years. And oftentimes, and it's true, we have also connected with an organization, we've had them on several times, called Mothers for Peace. And they were a group that was originally started to fight nuclear weapons, but they turned their attention to the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant because they realized it was putting the same radioactive isotopes that you'd get from a nuclear bomb it was dumping those same radioisotopes into their environment and affecting their children. So those defensive capabilities that mothers have when they're protecting their families and their children really are an essential part of the environmental movement. So thank you, mothers, all mothers who fight for their children against environmental threats. Thank you very much. So big news around here this past week, of course, all over the world really, were the Aurora Borealis. And I understand that Friday night was amazing.
For some people anyway.
For some people, I actually tried to watch it Friday night, but I had this big day. I was exhausted, and I stayed out until about 12:30 or 11:30, and then I was like, I gotta go to bed. And even though they were saying on the radio, oh, there's this huge coronal mass ejection on the way, it's making our satellites, making the needles quiver and everything, and it's coming, it's at 1,000,000 miles an hour, I ended up going to bed. And of course, the next morning saw thousands of pictures from people who are like, this is a life-changing experience. And
if it had been coming with donuts, I might have stayed up a little longer. But
so anyway, then of course they were also saying it last night, Saturday night, they're going to be visible again. And so this time I was like, we're not going to miss it. So I loaded up my van with a bunch of friends actually, and we went driving around looking for a dark back country road, and pulled off the road, and we had some snacks with us and lawn chairs and things, and it was fun. It was fun sitting out there, and of course we saw nothing. Yeah, we were ready. We were like, okay, now we're not gonna. It
was the adventure of it all.
We're not gonna miss this. Yeah, but it was nice though to just go and sit outside after dark, and we were we had binoculars, so we were looking at stars and just chatting and talking about wild animals and raccoons and stuff, because one of the woman that was in our group there was kind of phobic about almost anything wild. She was scared of ticks, she was scared of raccoons and possums, and so of course that's what we all talked about. But it was nice to just sit out there and be out in nature for a change later in the evening. And I wanted to touch on what the aurora shows us, because the reason we have those aurora is that radioactive particles from the sun in these coronal mass ejections get shot at the Earth at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and when they crash into the Earth's magnetic field, that's what shapes them and funnels them and causes the aurora to form. So the Earth's magnetic field, what you're watching is the sun trying to bombard us with radiation, and the Earth's magnetic field protecting you from that radiation. It's literally like if you were on like a spaceship that had a force field, and the enemy was shooting their phasers at your force field and lighting it up. That's what an aurora is these radioactive particles, which if they were allowed to just come down into the atmosphere would sterilize the Earth. But luckily, because we have this wonderful magnetic field, they're not. And so that's the Earth's magnetic field protecting you from death. That's what you see when you see an aurora. And it's just a reminder that there's also a larger magnetic field. So that's radioactive particles coming from the sun, but the larger magnetic field is the sun's magnetic field. That's called the heliosphere, and that is also protecting you from the radiation being given off in the galaxy, because every time there's a black hole or a supernova or anything really, it shoots radiation out into the galaxy. And again, if it weren't for the sun's magnetic field, that radiation would also bombard the Earth and sterilize it, because life and radiation really do not mix. I mean, by definition, life is making copies of itself. Life is stuff taking instructions from DNA and RNA and making copies and, growing new bits of life. But if you bombard DNA and RNA with radiation, it gets all messed up. It gets the very delicate molecules, they get destroyed, and then things can't copy themselves. They can't redo. And so that's why radiation sterilizes stuff. So the idea that you're going to take our little protected envelope here on the Earth, the surface of the Earth is one of the least radioactive places in the universe, because we have these magnetic fields protecting us and we have the atmosphere protecting us. And so all these people that want to fill our little protected pocket, our little tiny little envelope of relatively radiation-free environment, and fill that with radiation from things like nuclear power plants.
Go live on the sun if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just insane.
Burn outer space. I got places for people like you.
Right. And so that's why I want to talk to our next guest, that Diane D'Arrigo from Nuclear Information Resource Service, because there's some shenanigans going on, as we've said. So,
Great. Diane, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Welcome to the show. So,
Thanks.
if you could just remind people who you are and who you're with.
Yes, I'm Diane D'Arrigo, and I work on radioactive waste mainly at Nuclear Information and Resource Service, www.nirs.org.
Great. Thanks. And I invited you on the show today because there's there's kind of a complicated bait and switch thing going on there up there in Congress with this the Advance Act, with this nuclear promotion bill. Could you kind of walk us through what the Advance Act is and what's going on up there?
Okay, well, overall, this nuclear, I call it the Nuclear Advance Act. It's to push new nuclear, small nuclear, supposedly small nuclear, we call them magical because they're very mythical reactors, but new nuclear reactors. It would encourage more uranium, the whole uranium industry to be revived and to make fuel that is much closer to bomb grade. And it would encourage international export of nuclear technology and materials, and it would tell the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which was formed back in 1974 out of the Atomic Energy Commission, to regulate and be in charge of safety. And the Department of Energy is the agency that's supposed to promote nuclear technology. The bill encourages that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission rewrite its mission to be more promotional and not so stringent on regulating. And I'm talking to people in the area of Davis-Besse, which came within very small distance, less than an inch of the vessel head, getting a big hole in it and potentially releasing deadly radioactive material around the region in the way that, like Chernobyl did, destroyed whole areas. So anyway, this is an area that should be especially grateful that there is some regulatory control, even though actually, what I'm saying, the NRC actually wasn't doing its regulatory job. It was so weak there, and this would weaken it even further and make it its mandate to promote nuclear power.
That's the hole in the head incident you referred to, and we came within, I believe the number was 3/16 of an inch of catastrophe there, and the pro-nuclear people always make the NRC out to be this terrible, bureaucratic, overly zealous regulatory body that's like pushing rules and slowing down the whole industry, when really it's a lot more like, I just read there was some, I can't remember the reactor, but there was some violation that the NRC has been pushing the utility about for 19 years. And then they finally just...
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, they finally just issued the citation.
saying, all right, 19 years is enough. We're writing you a ticket. And the NRC has always been more like that, kind of a weak cop than this terrible thing. And yeah, there's tons of government agencies who already have the job of promoting. I mean, there's the Office of Nuclear Energy, for example, who is
within the Department of Energy.
Within Department of Energy.
Or you mean within the NRC? Oh, yeah.
No,
within DOE.
Within DOE, that's constantly just putting out these promotional tweets and videos. And
in terms of cops, it's kind of Barney Fife.
Yeah, it's more like Barney Fife than, yeah. So, all right. So anyway, so that's the background of the NRC.
So yeah, that's what the bill is. And the way that it formed. There was a bill in the House of Representatives. Well, actually, I think I should back up to about 3 or 4 years ago when the Nuclear Energy Institute, the nuclear industry, nuclear power promoters made a conscientious effort. I think it was NEI, though, that actually was planning to hire enough lobbyists to meet with every representative and senator, every one of their appropriate staff, and then even more attention to the committees that have power over nuclear and nuclear power. And that goal was set forth about 3 or 4 years ago. So money was definitely being invested, probably from utilities or membership in NEI, Nuclear Energy Institute, to get lobbying full-time, across the board, hundreds of lobbyists, or at least lobbyists that made sure that they met with every one of the U.S. Congress members and senators and their staff. So this was the mission put forth by the industry a few years back. In the meantime, 2 or 3 laws have passed that have provided massive subsidies to the nuclear industry. The Build Back Better Act and the IRA, the infrastructure bill, both of those gave at least as much to nuclear as it did to renewables that are the real answer for climate. So the bills were touted as energy efficiency and climate and all of that, when in fact money was going by our Congress, from our tax money, to support new nuclear and old nuclear, keep old reactors running, and so forth. So the 2 bills actually passed into law and were signed, and the industry is proceeding with trying to make even more concentrated uranium-235 fuel, and which causes a danger of proliferation because it's a very short step from what it would be for the new reactors to what it would be for nuclear weapons, not to mention that it could be used for very dirty bombs. So a couple of years back in the Senate, a bill, S-1111, and its precursor were put together, which do pretty much what the ADVANCE Act does, promoting new nukes, promoting revitalizing the uranium industry. That bill would have actually set up an office within the White House to actually promote pushing nuclear power and nuclear technology and materials to other countries. At the same time that the concentration of U-235 in the fuel was up to much closer to bomb grade, and certainly moving into high-enriched uranium. Reactors now are using 5% U-235. Above 20% is considered high-enriched uranium, and 93% and higher are what's used for nuclear weapons, to actually make the weapons. But the concentrating of U-235 in the fuel is, it gets easier to, at the beginning it's a lot of energy to do it. So by making what they're calling high-assay low-enriched uranium, that means getting it up to 19.75% U-235 plus or minus 2%, so potentially into the high enriched category, it could it uses most of the energy to do that. And Ohio is where Centrus and other companies want to do that. So it's being promoted as jobs, progress, and roads in Ohio, when in fact it's pivotal to accelerating nuclear proliferation dangers,
Right.
nuclear weapons proliferation.
Now, as I understand it, yes, our nuclear bombs, use 90+% pure U-235, which is the boom boom isotope. But as I understand it, if you get to 20%, you can make an inefficient, but nonetheless deadly. You could make a poor man's version of a nuclear bomb, enriching it just to 20.
Yeah, that's high enriched uranium. I mean, you could do it even with the lower enriched. It's still, there's no safe level.
Okay.
But the danger here is that putting it through more cycles of enrichment, it's not that big of a deal to get it from 20 up to 93. That's a much easier push than it is from the naturally occurring at, say, 0.7% up to 5%, 3 or 5% that are used now for nuclear fuel, for nuclear power reactors.
Okay.
And, of course, reactors make waste that have plutonium. But to get back to your request of me today was to give people an update on what's going on in Congress. We could also, at some point, you probably have talked about that there's no small nuclear reactor design that's even been technically completed, let alone certified and approved by the NRC at this point. I don't think there's one that has made it that far. In fact, the NRC, for the first time in its history, actually rejected an application for a new reactor because the application wasn't complete, despite the company claiming it was. So the bill in the Senate, S-1111, it went through the Senate Energy Committee, and it was directed to go to the floor, but it was never voted on the Senate floor. And then H.R. 6544, which was in the House, that actually did pass the floor on February 28th of this year. And so the promoters of nuclear and the leadership in both the House and Senate, which are pro-nuclear generally, met together and combined S-1111 and H.R. 6544. So we have a House and a Senate bill that do similar things, and together they hammered out the language for what is now being called the Advance Act. So the Advance Act was all by itself, and the language wasn't even made public until a vehicle was found to move it through the House. This is a different bill, S-870, which is a bill to fund fire research and firefighters for the next 4 years, passed on the Senate floor and went over to the House. Instead of the House passing this bill for firefighting, it added the Advance Act to it. So they took a 3-page bill to fund firefighting and fire research and added a 90-plus page bill to promote the whole nuclear industry and threaten international proliferation. And that was added on, and it got passed this week. 393 to 13 in the House.
Wow.
So we have lost in the House by an unbelievable amount. When you watch the floor discussions, there were 2 or 3 speakers that talked about the nuclear part, but the majority of the discussion was on this firefighting stuff and how, we've got to, of course, wildfires are a major danger every summer, and so nobody wanted to be accused of not supporting firefighters, and they voted for the bill despite the fact that the vast majority of the bill is nuclear promotion. So now we look at the Senate.
I just want to say how, hypocritical that actually is, because, as we saw with Chernobyl, the firefighters are the ones who suffer the most when there's a nuclear accident, because they're the ones that, have to go respond and get the biggest doses. So to
Yep.
to use
Yep,
them,
and nuclear facilities around the country have suffered fires.
yeah, and so to use to put this bill on the backs of our firefighters is, to me, this is one of the dirtiest legislative tricks I've seen in a long time. It's really, really discouraging. So go on. So now,
Well, the bill, we got letters to all of the House members asking them to vote against the bill or remove the Advance Act before voting for it. And of course, this obviously we did not prevail in any way, shape, or form. But just to finish the story, because I know the time is limited here, is that now this bill 870, which has the two divisions, the fire part and then the whole nuclear promotion scheme, that is it's been sent to the Senate. So we're not sure whether the Senate will vote again on S-870 as it is, whether the Advance Act will be added to another bill that is going through, or, I don't know what the procedures are going to be in the Senate. But the thing that listeners should do is contact both of your Ohio senators to tell them to vote against the Nuclear Advance Act, which at this point is part of S-870. And as soon as we figure out the mechanism, we'll do an alert, because it's easier to specifically target where it's going. But there's a good chance it could go through as soon as this week. I don't know timing-wise. I mean, the Advance Act was, the language was made public on Monday, and it was voted through on Wednesday or Thursday. So,
so
the
they must be
industry's
kind of
pushing hard.
embarrassed.
And what I wanted to say is that we had many years ago, a few years ago, the nuclear industry planning to do this kind of thing, and it's paying off for them. They are getting more nuclear support from Congress than ever before.
It's quite crazy. I did actually send a letter to J.D. Vance on this, and I pointed out that a basic conservative principle is you don't use the government to step in and distort the market by picking a winner and a loser in terms of energy. But that's exactly what this bill does, is it says, oh, nukes will win, and here's billions of dollars to do it, and here's turning regulatory agencies into promotion agencies to do it. And so I said, stay true to your conservative principles and vote against this, but we'll see if it had any effect. So, wow. All right. So we are running low on time, Diane. So if people want to follow this fight and keep up with what's going on this issue and other nuclear issues, how would they do that?
Our website is www.NIRS, Nuclear Information Resource Service. Those are the initials, NIRS.org.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to add before we have to move on in the show?
Well, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers and all the people who were born from mothers, and thank you for your interest in the environment and in the nuclear dangers that we're facing.
All right. Thanks very much, Diane. Okay. That was Diane D'Arrigo, a friend of the show.
Somebody was telling me yesterday, actually, the person who was driving us to our obedience class.
You mean Tashi's obedience class, right? Okay,
yeah, well, we're not that obedient either. We could use some help. But, they were telling me that there used to be uranium rods processed somewhere in Toledo's 5 Points neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Probably within walking distance of my house.
I did not know that one.
Yeah.
That's news to me.
Should probably get some more details from
Wow.
him.
Well, if any of our listeners know about that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Give us
call
a
us and
call.
tell us. 877-909-1007. Okay, so now it's time to hear from our advertisers who make all this possible.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
Okay, and we are also very grateful for the support of our patrons, and these are fantastic people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, our wonderful Patreon page, and they signed up for a monthly donation. Comes out of their checking account, comes over to us every month. People sign up at different levels. We've got people all the way at the $50 level, and we've got people all the way down at the $5 level. But we're very grateful for every single one. And with our advertisers and patrons, that's how we're able to bring you this incredible show every week. Okay, Rebecca, now it's time for Octomommy.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the YouTube channel Hood Nature, and his top pick for the best mother in nature is octopi.
Okay.
Mostly because female octopi don't eat for 5 months when they're sitting on their eggs, and then they immediately die after the eggs hatch.
Oh, wow.
Actually, it can be between 5 months, and the longest documented is 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Although, to be fair, the dads also die as soon as they've done their part, which is not much, but they just kind of immediately get dementia and just sit there and either starve to death or get eaten by something.
Uh-huh.
So, but yeah, that seems better than having to draw it out for a couple years, to me anyway. So yeah, I want to talk about octopi a little bit.
So octopi are born with this incredible guilt trip?
I guess, yeah.
Their mommy died for them?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Pretty much. Most of them are born orphans, though. So, they're octopi, in general, are soft-bodied, 8-limbed mollusks of the order Octopoda in the phylum Mollusca, I believe. They're also the second largest of the. Mollusca is the second largest phylum of invertebrates. Class Cephalopoda, it says here, along with squids, cuttlefish, and nautilids. And they have bilateral symmetry, like we do, means they kind of look the same on both sides. And they have a beaked mouth at the center of 8 limbs. So this already, is kind of giving outer space vibes here. I'm not, maybe people are making this up. I've seen octopi in the aquarium, so no. But yeah, apparently they do not use their legs to swim. They trail behind it, all the legs behind it as they swim. And they use siphons to swim and also to breathe. So it's just a little tube that they can suck things in or blow water out to propel themselves forward.
Kind of like rocket power.
Yeah, a little bit. Underwater rockets they are. And they're one of the smartest and most behaviorally diverse invertebrates, meaning you don't know what to expect from these guys. They do a lot of different things. Also, they're very compressible, so they're notorious for squeezing through small spaces, apparently. So, some places they like to live would include seabeds, coral reefs, abysmal depths, and pelagic waters, meaning that's like the ocean column in the open sea, basically, where there's no shore around for a long ways. Ecologically speaking, octopi are pretty good, except for when you get them all together into octopus farms, they're not as good. Because octopus farms produce toxic discharges, and they can escape and spread pathogens to local sea life, including turtles, dolphins, porpoises. And the seawater that they use that they're marinating there isn't always clean enough for food-grade stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's bad for people that way. And mass production in general can destroy ecosystems and fish species. I wonder if that's true in general of fish farming.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay. Problems that they're having with their habitat would be that they're suffering from food loss, from overfishing, and marine pollution. And also heat stress from global warming is affecting their range and size. They're getting smaller, apparently,
Oh, wow, I did
in
not know
some
that.
species. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess
So-
that makes sense. If you're in hot water, the smaller you are, the easier it is to dissipate to excess body heat.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, is that it?
That's
Okay.
it. Yeah.
All right, so.
Barely scratched the surface. They are crazy, complicated critters.
Yeah, I confess I've been watching some octopus documentaries
Yeah,
lately,
yeah.
and I love the taste of octopus, but I did see a meme where somebody said, I've been watching so many documentaries I can't eat octopus anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm starting
Bummer.
to drift in that direction myself, because
They're apparently about as smart as cats are.
well, yeah, and I've known some very shifty cats who've created quite complex schemes to get things. So
Yeah. The reason they don't have they're basically an opposable thumb away from becoming James Bond supervillains with titties.
right, and octopi certainly have the opposable thumb. They can grasp, they can manipulate tools. If they really put their minds to it, they could probably do it better than we can.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, we may be having some problems here. But all right, well, thank you for that, and of course we repeat Happy Mother's Day once again.
Yes.
And so now on
But
to
save a little me time. Don't be like the octopi. Don't give your kid all your energy and resources and then croak. That's not good.
yeah, no, that's right. We like that. I mean, you got to stick around because that's how you get all the Mother's Day presents.
Exactly.
Get taken out to dinner and stuff. If you
Yeah.
just, yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And now on to ecological news. And we're going to go back to U.S. Congress again here. There's a story, H.R. 1042, and according to the congressional website, this is a bill which bans Russian uranium imports. So finally, that's my response to that, because through this whole Ukraine conflict, the U.S. has been slipping Russia billions of dollars because we've continued to buy uranium fuel from them, even as we've said on the world stage, oh, we need to embargo them,
Oh, boy.
stop giving them money. Except here you go, Vlad. Here's a couple billion for the uranium.
Jeez.
So it's a good law. I agree completely. We should stop buying Russian uranium, but it does have some fairly big loopholes in it. One is that it sunsets. It ends in 2040. So I guess that they're figuring Russia will be we'll be buddy again with Russia by then. Another is that you can apply for waivers, and the two big waivers are if there's no alternative fuel available. So if it means you're going to shut your nuke plant down, you can buy Russian uranium. And two, if it's determined that continuing to buy the Russian uranium is in the national interest, which is a very broad category, because you can just say, of course it's in the national interest, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, a lot of the uranium importing companies have already applied for the waivers even before the law has been signed. It was presented to Biden on the 9th. He hasn't signed it yet, which doesn't surprise me too much, because through his whole administration, he's been prioritizing nukes over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Including, we should have banned uranium the day that uranium imports from Russia, the day that Russia invaded Ukraine. We should have just said, sorry, Vlad, no more checks for you.
We should have actually banned it the second uranium was discovered, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's true. So it remains to be seen if Biden's going to sign this or not, because he is literally the most pro-nuclear president in history. I mean, he's thrown hundreds of billions of dollars at the nuclear industry.
Loves those things.
And so far, actually, none of that money has has created anything. None of that money has resulted in more nuclear power plants or new nuclear power plants, because nukes are just so incredibly impractical and expensive and complicated that even his hundreds of billions of dollars haven't revived the industry yet. But there's a lot of people betting that it will. And if this law does get signed by Biden, and it probably will, because it had enough votes, because people want to be seen as being tough on Russia. If he does sign it, it would be a tiny little baby step in the right direction. So we'll see what happens. Next story. And this is a story that was in the magazine Power Engineering, April 30th. And the title is States Rethink Data Centers as Electricity Hogs Strain the Grid. And so what has happened is, as we've gotten AI and as we've gotten these Bitcoin mining data centers and all these huge warehouses full of computers just churning away, a lot of states put state policies into place that encouraged them, that gave them tax breaks, sometimes even outright grants of state money, of tax dollars, to come to their state. And a lot of states are realizing, hey, we've been had. This is not a good deal at all, because it turns out that these data centers, they use tons of power. They could use, some of them use several gigawatts of power, and a gigawatt is roughly the output of a nuclear power plant. But they only have like a few dozen jobs at the most, because mostly it's just computers sitting there churning away. And often the AI that these computers are creating is eliminating jobs for other people. As AI puts more and more people out of work, the computers that run the AI need fewer and fewer workers. And so, particularly in Virginia, there's a move to remove $2 billion. Well, what they calculated is that they're spending $2 million per job that the data centers create. At the same time, the data centers are also eliminating other jobs. So that they're writing reports, they're analyzing things, they're creating art, all the stuff that humans used to think we'd get to do. Once computers took over, we do all the fun stuff, and instead the computers are doing all the fun stuff, and we're back to flipping burgers and things. Turns out that not only do these data centers use tons of electricity, they also use tons of water, because the supercomputers need cooling, and so they use tons of water for cooling too. Right now, nationwide, we're using about 17 gigawatts of power. In other words, 17 nuclear plants worth of electricity are going into these data centers, but that's expected to more than double, up to 35 gigawatts by 2030. So in just 6 years, and right now they're using enough power to match the electricity used by 26 million homes. And so some of the states, like Connecticut, is looking at actually ending their subsidies, saying, maybe we shouldn't be using tax dollars to encourage these things. Dominion Energy has said that they are expecting the demand for these data centers to increase by 90 megawatts in the next year. In 2021, data centers in Dominion's territory used 21% of all the electricity they generated. And in 2023, that increased to 24. And here in 2024, they're going to go over the quarter mark. So more than a quarter of all the energy Dominion produces in electricity will be going into these data centers. And it reminds me of the old joke that back when home computers were first a thing, one of the first things people did was they put their home finances on the computers. And the old joke is that, honey, I ran the numbers with our computer and I found out we can't afford this computer. And so that's kind of what's going on with all these states that have been giving incentives to these power centers. Now, there's a very simple solution here, and that is that what we should do is pass laws requiring that data centers provide their own electricity. And this is not actually difficult or exotic, because it turns out that to generate 1 gigawatt of power of solar, okay, you need 2.8 acres of solar fields. And the average data center, which are, you've seen them, you may not have realized you saw them because they look just like regular warehouses, but they're these huge flat roofed buildings, perfect for putting solar on. And the average data center takes up 24 acres.
Ooh.
So you could literally put 10 times the amount of power a data center is going to use right on top of the data center. And so if we simply made that the requirement, then we won't be having any of these problems. A lot of engineers are predicting that this is going to strain the grid, that we're going to need new transmission lines. It's going to increase the cost of electricity because of competition. It's going to mean more fossil fuels because the renewables, the utility renewables can't gear up fast enough. But if you require data centers to provide their own power, they can actually provide more power than they use. They can become power centers instead of electricity hogs. So, simple solution. Let's see if anybody thinks of it. Next story. This is from The Guardian.
Biden's probably going to want them to all have their own mini nuke plant instead.
Well, actually, that is being
Crap.
proposed.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
No, literally, that's what Bill Gates wants.
Yeah.
He's saying, I want one of my SMRs, at each of my data centers. And the problem with that, of course, is, as Diane mentioned, is they haven't figured out how to build an SMR yet.
Yeah.
They're still like a decade off.
Right.
And so if you wait until you figure out SMRs, in the meantime, these data centers could literally crash the grids that they're attached to, unless they start providing their own power.
Gotta love that imaginary technology.
Yeah, it's the imaginary technology is amazing.
It is,
It provides fantastic power. It never has any technical problems.
Yeah.
And it never breaks down. It's beautiful. That's because, of course, it's imaginary.
Yes.
All right, on to our next story. Guardian, May 11th. Brutal heat waves and submerged cities, what a 3C world would look like. That means a world where the temperature is increased by 3 degrees centigrade. Story ran on May 11th. And what The Guardian did was they surveyed hundreds of climate experts and climate scientists, and only 6% of them at this point think that we can hold global warming down to 1.5 degrees centigrade. They think we're already blown past that. So 94% of them think it's too late. But they all also are unanimous in saying giving up is not an option, because we might have already blown past the 1.5 degree, but if we keep putting more carbon in the air, we could go to 3, we could go to 5, we could go to 10, which is absolutely catastrophic. So it's still, the quote is, giving up is not an option, it's still useful to continue to fight. So very bad news there. And those of us who watch the environment, those of us who care about these things, we're all kind of mystified as to why everybody hasn't just changed their behaviors already, because it's got to happen, and it will happen one way or the other. Either it'll be forced on us because things are going to get destroyed, or we're going to do it voluntarily, which would be a lot of fun, and it would bring in the green future, which we've often said is better than the way we do things now. Okay, on to one more bit of evidence as to why we have to do this. April, turns out, was the hottest April on record, and in fact April was the 11th month in a row where we had the hottest month on record. So April was 1.58 degrees above the pre-industrial temperature level, which is the level that we have pledged not to exceed. We were supposed to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees. We're already 1.58. And in fact, April 2024 was 0.67 degrees hotter, over half a degree hotter than the temperature averaged from 1991 to 2020. So this is data from the EU Copernicus satellite. And, you know, some of the stories you haven't heard about April of 2024 was that Asia has had this incredible heat wave. For the India elections, the temperature for people standing in line at the polls was over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. In Vietnam, the rice paddies have dried up. So you need a lot of water to grow rice. It's just not there. Vietnam is run dry. Schools have been closed for the past month in Bangladesh. There's been a global coral bleaching in April, which is the worst coral bleaching on record, by the way. And interestingly enough, the pictures they're showing finally of people in these heat waves are actually people splashing water on themselves and actually being hot. I saw one picture of a bunch of people, like 100 people, just laying in the shade of this baobab tree, because it's much better than the stereotypical picture for people in a heat wave has always been people at the beach, you know, having a great time, you know, oh, let's go swimming, it's hot. But now they're starting to actually finally show the real image, which is people laying around because it's too hot to literally get up and do anything. So let's hope, although most likely this month, May 2024, will once again be the hottest month, May, on record, which will be a solid year of records. And we know this is going to continue to happen and get worse because we know what is happening, Rebecca?
Positive feedback loop.
Positive feedback loop is happening. And some of those scientists still can't admit that. Like that 6% that think we can still hold it down to 1.5 degrees. But more and more scientists are coming to realize, yes, we're stuck in a positive feedback loop, which makes it even harder for them to, when they look at what's going on in the world. Next story. This is a story from the Louisiana Illuminator, which is a tiny little paper that covers Sulphur, Louisiana, tiny little town, where they had a big carbon dioxide leak. There was a 2-foot diameter pipe that broke and dumped 107,000 gallons of CO2 into the air. CO2 is colorless, odorless, it's heavier than air, and this pipeline was carrying gas, CO2, that was going into one of the carbon capture and storage schemes that are scams that was being funded by the Biden administration. Turns out that there's no alarms, there's no monitoring. Basically, somebody saw these huge clouds billowing from this pipeline and called it in. It took 2.5 hours from the time there was a report before teams arrived and closed it up. And in that 2.5 hours, people were told to shelter in place.
Oh boy.
Which is probably the stupidest thing you can tell people, because CO2 is heavier than air, and so it will fill up whatever area it starts to get put into.
I think you'd want to go someplace high at
Yes,
that point.
you do. You want to drive away from the CO2.
Or maybe far.
Find some far high ground and hang out there till it's over. And in fact, in 2020, there was a similar CO2 leak in Sataria, Mississippi. 200 people got evacuated and 45 of them had to be hospitalized.
Oh,
The symptoms of CO2 poisoning, just in case you were wondering, headaches, drowsiness, and potentially death. So this is an inevitable...
I'm sure death is a symptom of a lot of things.
Yeah. This is an inevitable consequence of this carbon capture and storage scheme/scam, because they want to create 65,000 miles of CO2 pipelines. And once again, this is to just pump the CO2 into the ground, when every time we've attempted it so far, the CO2 leaks back out again. Mostly because we're pumping it into old oil fields, which have thousands of holes drilled in them by the old oil wells. So not good, not good.
Yeah, okay, wasn't that town that's permanently on fire? Didn't they set their dump on fire, and it turns out it was connected to all the old coal mines in the area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you start messing around under there, you really mess things up pretty much forever.
Yep.
Okay, so now to counter all that, I'm going to close on some good news here. Portugal just announced that they have, for the entire month of April, they were more than 95% carbon-free power. So that was, Portugal had a 48% hydro, 30% wind. Interestingly, only 7% solar. They've only just begun to tap their solar resources. But they plan to double their wind. Right now they have a 12 gigawatt capacity. They are going to double it to 12 gigawatts. It's 6 gigawatts right now. But again, this is another country without nuclear power. And we're seeing this as a pattern over and over again around the world. If you don't have nukes, you're making the transition to 100% renewables much more quickly than those countries, those of us that are being burdened by all this radioactive crap. That's it. We've reached the end of the show. Thanks so much for listening, and I guess we can't say it often enough. Happy Mother's Day again. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes